Back again, and welcome back to what seems like an eternity. It's been over a month and a half now since I've last been on here posting anything, and I've been really busy, guys. I've been really busy with the primary job because that is what pays the bill. So I have to pretty much try and put all my focus when that comes around. I have to try and just get that done. But that's not going to go away anytime soon. So what I'm thinking of doing is I've started buying some portable equipment. So when I'm away working away, I get back to the hotel in the evening. I can then set up and try and put out these content so we can get ourselves back up the YouTube algorithm and try and grow this channel as much as we can. But that's pretty much what's been happening. Just work. But at the same time, I've not given up anything that we're doing right here. I'm still pretty much actively developing this framework off screen, and I have been pushing stuff to GitHub. So if you've been checking that out, you'd have noticed that. But still, I've been recent commit that I've been committing when when I've got a spare bit of time, not enough time to do a video, but enough time to do a bit of coding. I'm still committing to GitHub. So the project is still pretty much active, pretty much alive. And what I'm going to be doing in the next few videos, because I actually want to try and get at least 10, 12 videos done for this month, because as I'm saying, I haven't done anything for June and probably back in the May as well. And we've started July, and I actually want to try and get as much out this month as possible. So YouTube hasn't forgotten about us and try and leaving us behind. So I want to try and make up some time, make up back, catch up back where we left off, and try and get back into the rhythm of this project that we've been doing. So what's gonna be happening over the next few videos is I'm going to be actually going back over an application that I started doing, but it wasn't getting a lot of traction, purely because I don't think I was doing it a lot of justice, perhaps in the way I've been pushing it out. So I'm going to do like a little reboot, and we're going to be rebuilding this application. It's like a basic skeleton application that we can use to then develop a much bigger or a more medium-sized application. And guys, you can take what you've learned right here. You could take it and you could do your own stuff with it. If you've got your own project and you've seen something here that you like, you could take it out because it's an open source stuff. It's on GitHub. I've got no qualms about that. That's why I've put it up there so you guys can take from it, learn from it, add to it, because I'm learning, you're learning. That's just how it is. So you don't have to come and build what I'm building. You can build something, something that you might already started on your own. You're just looking for ideas, looking for how to do certain things, and that's pretty much what you can come and take from this. Just take what you want from it, or if you want to follow along what I'm doing right here, that will be good as well. And I also want to thank everyone who's been subscribed. Everyone who has subscribed so far, thanks a lot for that. Really appreciate it. All the comments and all the feedbacks and stuff like that, I really appreciate that as well from everyone who's been supporting the channel. And again, guys, please keep the engagement up. Just leave stuff in the comment. No question is a stupid question. Just leave a question, and I've done well so far to have answered all the questions that's been asked. And so keep that up. If you like the videos, like it. If you dislike it, dislike it. That's cool. I'm not expecting everyone to like what I'm doing. That's YouTube for you, and that's the social life in a nutshell. Not everyone is gonna like what you're doing. So like it, dislike it, leave comments. Just keep the engagement up so we can trigger that YouTube algorithm again to say that we're here, we're back again, and we're gonna be pushing out some more stuff. and try and get back on track. So what I've got on my screen right now is I'm trying out a new editor, and this is the Atom editor. I was using PHP Storm by one of my YouTube followers called RX5700. Shout out, mate. Shout out for that PHP Storm that you sent. It's been a really, really good editor. I really like it. It's very opinionated, but it really sort of like pushes you to write good, valid code. But however, however, I had run into a little bit of an issue with PHP Storm. So for now, for the time being, I have just jumped to something a little bit different, and we're gonna be using this temporarily to sort of like start our project. But as soon as I sort of like figure out what's going on with PHP Storm, I'll start using that over again. But what I've got on my screen is what you will find on GitHub. This small project that we've been doing, this Magma skeleton, is really just a skeleton version, like a basic application that is gonna contain everything that you will find within a basic application, meaning user authentication and user management, including roles and permission. So most application is going to have something like that. So that's what I'm building right here. Something that you can then take away and then develop on for develop even a bigger application that you can use this as the base for it to sit on. So that's pretty much what we're doing, and it's not easy, guys. Trust me, if you've been doing or building frameworks, no matter what language, you know it's not an easy task. There's quite a lot involved in terms of putting stuff in the right places, organizing it. So when it comes to grow, you know exactly where stuff is. It can grow seamlessly, and it's organized basically. And it's not easy because there's quite a lot to think about when you're writing frameworks. There's a lot of obstacles, a lot of variables that you have to try and put in place. So it's not an easy task, especially when you're doing it on your own. It requires quite a lot of thinking, a lot of strategic thinking, thinking about worst case scenarios and stuff like that. So it's a big task, building any framework. So bear with me on that as well. I mean, if you've got any input, or if you want to contribute, which is a better thing, you can do that through GitHub. You could contribute to it. You could add stuff, and again, I'm open to working with anyone to help develop this as far as I possibly can, because it's an open source. And it's not just something we're going to be using to build application. It's something we're going to be using to also learn from, and learn different techniques, and learn how we can integrate and do certain things with it. So I'm going to quickly sort of like give a little recap on where we are in terms of what we were last doing. And we're going to try and jog our memory back into where we left off, right? So let's make my little screen bigger, like that. So you can see we still got a basic directory structure. We still got our application directory, which contains
I don't know that one.
which contains all of our front end code. Right, so this contains all the stuff that we're going to see in a minute, like all of our controllers. We've got forms. We got on our templates for UI, and again, this is not going to be a UI sort of like application, because I'm well aware that you guys might actually want to use your own CSS framework to build your own UI. So this is not going to be a UI application. It's purely going to show you guys how you can integrate and build upon what we've already done with those components that we've been building from day one. So the UI is not that important, but if you want to use the UI that I'm using, you're free to do so. It's part of the actual package. But if you want to put your own UI in that, you can do that as well, because I've come across people who's already doing that, and that's completely fine. So there's a lot of changes. Once the changes, I mean like code changes or improvements that I've done since the first day I've been doing this, writing these on YouTube. So we've made some structural changes, some code changes to try and improve the syntax, to make it more readable. I'll try and make it as organized as I possibly can, and we're going to be going through this so you guys got a good understanding of where everything is. So when you come to building your own, then you know exactly where to go and find what you're looking for, right? So I'm going to sort of like briefly go over what each folder is doing and what is new, what you've not seen before, and what exactly it's there for, right? So we got a API folder, and this just contains internal API stuff like user help and search. But again, I've not really done much with this because I'm not quite sure if I want to use it or not. So this, at this particular moment, is not all that important. All right. So we go on to Commander, and the Commander is something I've added in a few weeks ago, and it's like a toolbar within our UI, and it simple sort of like creates links that we can then use to jump around the different section of a particular component. And this is more, you'll benefit more from this from a visual point of view once I switch my screen over to the actual application I've got running right now. You will see a visual demonstration of what that is, right? So that's essentially all it is. It's just a toolbar in our dashboard that allows us to jump around and things get populated dynamically. So I will show you that in a minute, so not to worry about that too much. And controller obviously is our controllers that our router is going to dispatch for us when we request a particular route, right? So I've tried and organize these as much as I can. So we got admin, so everything that goes into the backend is going to be within an admin directory. So that is our admin directory. It contains all of our backend controllers, which is all going to be which is not going to be accessible to non-admin users. So only admin or users that is got the right criteria can actually access these controllers. And the front end controller is just these files that's not actually within a directory, but they're just in the main controller directory, and these are the front end controllers, right? And again, we're going to quickly look at the UI. We're going to go over them, and we're going to see what they look like and what they're doing, right? So we got our database, and this is a folder that I've created a while ago now, and it's going to pretty much contain stuff like, I'm going to be moving this schema directory within that database because that is part of our database, right? So again, I'm going to show you what the schema is in a minute. That might be new to some people who's not been here from the very beginning, but I will go back over it again so you know exactly what it's doing and what my intention is, what I was trying to do with it. So database is going to contain that schema and these fillables. So this is also new, and what fillables are, let me just bring that up so you can see what it looks like. So again, we pretty much try and be consistent in the way we design our files, design these components. So we always try and design by an interface which is going to allow us um, to sort of like, what's the word I'm looking for, to extend the capabilities of these components later on, if we so wish to do so, right? So we got the fillables, and what fillables are is a structure that allows us to insert fake data within our database. It's purely for development. When you're developing, you want some content in your database, we can quickly use these fillables to add dummy data or fake data to our database. And it goes like this. It's got a very similar structure to the schema, and this is pretty much what it looks like. So we got our fillable object, and we call in the create method, and the first argument is how much records that we want to generate. By default, it's got one. It's got a callback function which define our fillable. So we got our faker first name, faker last name, email, and faker password, etc., etc. Again, we will touch onto that later on, because this isn't a basic stuff. This is pretty advanced in what it's actually doing. I hope you guys can see what I'm seeing, because I'm looking at my recording screen and I'm not seeing the entire page. Let me just check this quickly. Well, sorry about that. I've got a new setup right here. I'm still trying to get the best in terms of the best streaming experience. Well, not streaming, the best recording experience. And I can look at my screen. I can tell that you guys are not seeing what I'm seeing. So I'm going to just put some white space in that for now, so you can see exactly what I was talking about just now in terms of this fillable class that we're in. So we've got our fillable object, and we're calling that create method, and it accepts two arguments. The first is the amount of records that we want to, dummy records that we want to generate. By default, it's got one, and we got a callback function or a closure which build that fillable structure. And you can see the first argument within that fillable object is the table which we want to work in, and that's going to be the user model. And you can see up in the constructor, we're pretty much passing in all the classes that we want to auto-wide, because these are being auto-wide. So you notice that we've not calling the new keyword, because by default with all of these classes, they're all like dependency injected. So whatever we pass in the constructor, saying being that it's a type inted class, that will be automatically instantiated for us. So you can see we're not using new keyword. We're simply piping those class property to these variable, and you can see we're passing this user model as the argument for this particular method within this fillable object, right? And the other method within that object is the fill, and that takes in an argument of what we're trying to fill. And we'll fill in the first name, last name, email, password, etc., etc. But we're going to be getting a little bit deeper into the fillable when we get to that stage, because I said it's not something that we're going to be using to develop. It's purely, well, sorry, it is something we're going to be using in a development environment, but for production it's not required. It's just something I built because I did find myself trying to put dummy data in the database every now and then, and I thought if I create something within the application which is going to do that for me automatically, why not do that? And hence I came up with the fillable component, right? The core component is within the core directory. This is just how we use it within our application. But we're going to be going through that. I'm going to try and enlighten you as much as I can, so you guys get a really good understanding of what is it I was trying to build, because that is important to me, that you guys understand where I was coming from, where my thoughts and thinking were. So it's my job to make sure that you completely understand this particular framework, so you can comfortably take chunks of it and understand how to integrate it within your own project, right? So that's my promise to you guys. I'm gonna try and make you understand as much as possible about how I go about doing certain things, or why I'm doing certain things, right? So that's the fillable, and I will touch on to it later on, when the time is right. So, I'm not trying to put too much on you too quickly. So data column, that's something that's been part of the application from day one, and it allows us to define our table structure for index page. So if we're getting our index route where we want to display all the content of our database within a database table, this is pretty much how we do that within this particular application. So data column allows us to return an array of all the rows or columns within that database table. So this is the structure of how we do that, and it's the same across all of these files, being that the rows are going to be different, representing the rows by those same rows that we've got in our database. And that is how we're fetching the information and structuring our table accordingly. You can see we've got stuff like show columns, sortable, searchable, right? So the show columns allows us to show the column within our table on our index page. We can either show it or disable it. We can make that column sortable or not. We can make that column available for search. So we can search for that particular column within our search box. Again, I will visually show you those in a minute, so you get a better idea of what I'm talking about. And the next one is the formatter. So this allows us to actually structure our table row, so we can try and make it as unique as possible by providing different structure of how we can display that data. I mean, it's completely optional. If you leave it like how we see it down this section right here, leave it with an empty string, it will just return the data as it is coming from a database. But it allows us to manipulate that data, so we can display it a little bit differently if we want. And I will show you also an example of that when we come to look at the UI in a minute. So that's pretty much what all these are. We've got different columns for all of the entities or models we got in our database, right? So let's close these down. Let's quickly walk through. Don't save anything. Don't save. Right. So our entity, and this has been, I've been a little bit up and down with this particular one. And initially, what the entity was, it's essentially the idea behind the entity is that I wanted this to be the point where I take in any submitted data, any data that's been submitted either via a form or an API, and the idea is this component is solely responsible for sanitizing that data that's coming in. So whatever data is coming in is being treated as dirty, and the entity job is to sanitize that data and return it as a collection. Now the collection part of it is only something I've added in recently, but before that it was a simple returning a sanitized array, right? But now I'm returning an object, a collection object, which allows us to also use some of the collection methods to further filter and manipulate that data, right? But that is purely what the entity job is to sanitize the incoming data into our application. That is the first point of contact, if you want to put it like that. So, and every model has got its own entity class. So it's all these entity class that we got in our directory is representing a model within our database, and it's pretty much all it is just that. It's just a class that we've defined, and we extend the base entity. And you might be asking, why have we got so much class which is just a empty class? Well, the reason for that is within part of our core framework, we need these specific entity classes so we can do different stuff. We can use, as a matter of fact, actually, we're using these entity classes to create our validation class. So that hence why we need to have a class for each model, right? Because we're creating unique validation class as well. Again, it will make more sense once we get into that part of the framework and start building our application. I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about. So that's all the entity class is. It's to sanitize and filter out any dirty characters, any sort of like user dirty input, and try and clean it up before we goes anywhere near our database. Because we always want to treat any data as malicious. So the next one is event, and I don't want to get into this too much at this point because it's quite not complex, but there's a lot to events. I mainly use quite a lot of events within this application, and you will see exactly what I'm saying once I get into it. So we got events, we got listeners, and we got subscribers, which is what I mostly use. I don't use the listeners. I use mostly subscribers because I can have a lot of listeners subscribe to a particular object, right? And that's the reason why I use subscribers, because I can essentially kill many birds with one stone. And forms is also something that's been part of the frameworks from day one. And again, it allows us to build our front end or back end form in an objective way. So we can then pass a single variable to our HTML template to display that form. I'm going to show you a quick one, because this has also been, it's also gone through a rework. So the code that I had for this originally, it's a little bit different now. So this is pretty much what let's go for a much more simpler one. Go for a front end form. Go into our client and get our security form, login form. So this is our login form, which we're going to see in a minute. And this is essentially, let's get some more space on that so you can see. This is essentially what our form looks like. So again, just like the Fillable, this will look very familiar in terms of how we've laid it out. Again, what I'm saying, I'm trying to be as consistent as possible in our go about building these components. So again, we're designing by interface. We can pass any type entity class within the constructor, and that will be automatically instantiated for us. We pipe in those variables to class properties so we can use them down within our method. And the create form is an interface method. So if we're going to create any form using this approach, we have to implement that create form method, because we've got different components that is looking out for these methods, right? So I've designed the framework in a way that if you go with the convention that I've laid out, then it's going to reward you by helping you do certain things. Again, you can go against the convention, but you might find yourself in trouble, or you might find yourself doing a bit more work to get to point A or point B, whatever point you are. But if you go with the convention, then you'll find that things are a little bit more simple, because I've done quite a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure that is the case, right? So create form, it takes in 3 arguments, which is all optional. That's why they're all equal to null, right? So we got the form, which is the first method within the chain, because these are all chainable methods. So we got the form, and this allows us to pass in an array of key value pair. So we can pass in the form action, which is a argument of that create form, so we can dynamically pass the action to the form wherever we're using this method, right? We can pass different classes, and we've got a lot of different attributes that we can pass within this array, which I will go over and show you as we get into building these. And we can add a repository to this form as well, which is going to be the data repository, which is going to be our user model, right? Because the user model is directly part of our security controller, because that controller is accessing our users table. So that's all part of the user model or data repository. Again, I will show you exactly what these are when we come to rebuild them, because that's what I'm planning on doing. I'm planning on rebuilding it so you guys can so we can walk through it together, so you can see exactly where I'm coming from. We can add, and the add method allows us to add different fields. And again, you notice that you've seen this blueprint, and what the blueprint object is it abstract away a lot of the methods that I had before that was returning long arrays, and we're simple now just calling email with arguments, password with arguments, and that's essentially all the blueprint contains, abstract methods, which allows us to easily bring in different input types. But again, I will go over all of it when we come to build it. I just wanted to see the code that I've developed for these, and it's very different from what we started out doing from the very beginning. And we got our submit button at the very end. It's got a value name of login, and we've got the name of our submit button, which is our controller method. If you look, we got index security. Our controller method is going to be security controller with the index method. So that's essentially what we're using to identify our buttons or our submit buttons. So that's a typical form, and that's always going to look for any form that we're building, barring the different inputs or the input type that we're going to be passing to our forms. So let's not save nothing there. Close that. And let's quickly look at a basic controller, because this has also gone through some changes. And you can see that we've got a constructor. I mean, I've explained this in previous videos, but again, we've got a constructor which accepts a parameter, well, which gets a parameter called route params, right? Which we're simply passing back to our parent constructor class. Because remember, when we create our controller from our router class, we pass in a argument which we can accept into each of our controller, we can then pass that back down to our base controller, right? And also we're also declaring a method within this constructor, and this is called di container. I've also got another aliases of this particular method, which is called, and it's called, sorry, it's called, I forgot what it's called. I think I've got it somewhere right here. It's called add definition. That's it. So add definitions, and if you come across this, it's essentially returning this method with the argument. And why I've done that is I think add definition is a better name than di container for some reason. I just that's my opinion. So if you come across add definition, just note that it's the same as this method. It's simply returning this di container method, right? And so what this di container or add definition method does, it allows us to declare a key value pair. So the key is going to be the property that contains, that owns the value, which is that object, right? So this is going through the di container, and it's automatically being instantiated for us, also meaning that if any of these classes got any type inted class within the constructor, they will also be automatically instantiated for us as well. So this is what this di container or add definition is doing. It's allowing us to actually define local dependencies for our controller, right? So because these are going to be unique, these dependencies are going to be unique to this particular controller. So this is essentially what this is doing. And you can see login form gets our login form class. So if we come down to our index action, you can see we're passing that login form to our form method. And this overall structure right here, the syntax, is also very new, because if you was taking it in from the very beginning, you were noticing that you would have noticed that I had quite a lot of logic in the controller, and I've done away with that now, because I found that I was having the same logic in many controllers, which was quite the same. So what I've then turned to now is I've turned to single action classes, and what the single action classes allows, it allows me to reuse those action in different controller using the same logic, because that's exactly what it is using the same logic, and using the single action classes allow me to share those logic across different controllers. So not only does that make it more consistent, it makes it easy for me to sort of like maintain, because for example, if I go to, let's go to a different controller which got a little bit more method in. Let's go to our role controller, for example, and you can see in our new action route we've got a new action property, and that's an object, that contains all these method, right? So the execute method is what handle the logic, and I will show you those perhaps in a different video, because I quite like the idea. I quite like the idea of having single action classes that contain logic that I can use across different controllers. That's essentially what it is. So let's just try and get one of these logics so you can see. And this is going to be within the core directory. So if I go to the vendor and go to MagmaCore source, let's go to base, domain, actions, and let's get our new action. So this is our new action, and you can see it contains that execute method, which is what we've got right here. That execute method takes in quite a lot of arguments, but I want to actually explain these in a separate video because in my opinion these are very sophisticated logic. Well, sophisticated, yeah, it's a bit pushing it a little bit far, but I like the fact that I can reuse these logic across all my controller that require that's got a new action route, right? And this is specifically for adding data to our database. That's what the new route or new index route does in any controller. It adds stuff to our database, and this is the logic that does all of that for us. And you can see what I was saying about the entity. It actually is responsible for sanitizing that data and returning it as a collection, which is what we've got right here. And again, I want to also do a different video explaining the event dispatching, because we're dispatching event on all of these single action route, right? But I want to do that in a separate video because I want you guys to understand fully what that is doing. So let's not save anything again. So this is the new syntax for all of our routes. They're pretty similar, and you can see that we can actually pass. Tell you what, let me explain to you exactly what's going on here, so you get an idea of what I was thinking. So we got our index action, which is our single action class, and this index action is defined. You see, it's not defined within this local dependency because we can use this action in any controller. So we've defined it within our admin controller. So if I go back up to the top, admin controller, because remember, all of our backend controllers extend into that admin controller. So if we define those actions within that controller, we can access them from any of our controllers. I really hope that makes sense. So it's defined right here: index action, show action, new action, edit action. So we don't have to declare those within our local dependency. We can declare them right in this admin class, which is going to give us access to all of these properties in any controller class that extend this admin controller class. So index action is defined within this class. We can use it within our index action, within our roles controller, and we're passing in a few arguments, and the chain goes like this. So we got execute, render with, table, and end, right? So the render method is where we display a template with table. So we're displaying a view with a table, and you will see that this changes on different route. Like the new action route, will execute, render with a form, right? Just like so. And again, we got different stuff that we can render with. We can render with a singular stuff, or we can render with a. There's another one that I can't remember what it was, but we can render with table, form, singular, and I think there was a couple other ones that we can also render with. But as we go ahead building these, you're going to see what they are. And also take note that we got action routes, but you don't see us defining any templates, right? This is what I was saying earlier. If you go with the convention, it will reward you with trying to figure stuff out internally and doing it for us. So new action, so long as we go with the convention, right, what this will do for us, it will automatically, so long as we've got a template within the correct directory, it will actually try and find the template that matches that matches this route within this controller class, and it will display that template for us, right? So we don't have to declare the template ourselves. It will try and find it for us, so long as we go with the convention. If you go against convention, you have to pass that template in yourself. Or if you want to pass a different template in, you can actually pass that as the argument within that render method. But if we leave it blank, it will automatically try and find the template that matches role. So if I go to the template directory, is going to look into the admin directory, because we're working within the admin controllers. It's going to try and find the role directory, and it's going to try and find the new index route, right? Just like so. So long as we go with that convention, it will automatically try and find these things for us. So let's close that. But again, event dispatching and single action classes, I'm going to do a separate videos for those, because I think they need explaining by themselves, or not just a quick summary. So that's essentially what all my controllers now look like in terms of the syntax for distributing these routes or displaying these routes. Let's close that. What we got, again, middleware is also something that we need to go over in a separate video, but essentially we got before and after middleware, and what that does is allows us to execute some code before we call a route and after we call a route. And that could be anything. You could do whatever you want to do with middleware, right? So we're not going to get too much into that, because we know what that is. Migrations. I've also developed a small migration component, which we go into, well, our schema that we create. We can generate a migration from that schema, a database ready migration file that we can push to our database to create that particular schema table. So that's directory is empty, because we have not generated no migration files yet, but that's what that is. But again, that's part of a database, which I'm going to move to that database folder at some point. Now our model is the gateway to our database, right? How we define the model is also very, very simple. So if I pick a model right here, plugin model, they're all the same. The only required arguments are these two constant, and the constructor. So also you might notice that initially we only pass these two arguments to the parent constructor within the main constructor in previous videos, but I've now added a third argument, which is the plugin entity, which we discussed just a while ago. That's now being passed in as a valid class name as the third argument to our parent constructor in our models, right? Again, I will explain all the other little bits that is within this class, but note that these are the two required constant, the constructor, and also this actual method as well, because we're extending this abstract model, which is implementing an interface. No, it's implementing an interface, but within this abstract model, it's also forcing us to define this particular method, this guarded ID method. And I will explain to you later on again what the idea was behind this. So that's the model. They're all the same. How we define them, they're all pretty much the same. Table schema and table schema ID is the primary key for our table, and table schema is the name of our table, plural, like projects or users, etc. I will simply pass in those constant using the self keyword, because that is how we pass constant by using the self keyword, or passing that to the parent constructor for our base model, which is what this abstract class is extending into, and it's also implementing an interface as well. So that's what the model is, or gateway to our database. Relationships is also experimental. It's something I've been experimenting with. You can't see it in a minute because, so again, this is something I'm working on at the minute to try and get it integrated. And these are all what I was saying, developing a framework. There are so many variables that you have to really think about. And when you're doing it on your own, yeah, it takes time. It really does. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of thinking space to actually try and put all these things together. But I won't touch on that yet because it's not quite finished. But let's not worry about that. Repository is also linked to our model, and it's a way of sort of like adding in extra methods, because without a doubt, when you're building your own application, there are going to be methods that you want to implement that is not part of the core framework. It might be something niche that you want to put in. You could put it into a repository, and it's all going to be linked. Well, you link it to a model, like, so we're extending into our user model, and we got individual interface. Like, for example, we've got activation repository, and this is to do with our activation process. So when a user register, they get sent an email with a activation token, and you click that token, and this is a class that handles what that token does for us. Like, it will verify the token is valid, and it will change some database settings. Like, for example, the status of our data, the status field within our users table will automatically be set to pending when you register. When you activate your account, it will change that to active, right? So that's what this activation repository is doing. It's an extension of our user model, right? That contains additional methods that I didn't want to put in my models class, so I created this section for them. And again, we've got password recovery, and again, we're extending that user model, and we're implementing a password recovery interface, which contains these methods that we have to implement. Again, this is my way of doing it. The repositories are they're not exactly required. You could have put these methods within your models if you wanted to. That's completely up to you. So now we come to the schema, and the schema is a way we define our database table. That's essentially what it is. So if I open up one, let's get a role schema. It's quite simple. Again, you notice the structure is very similar to our forms and our fillables. Trying to make it as consistent as possible. We can pass in any type inted class we want within the constructor, and it will initialize those classes for us, right? Because they're all dependency injected. And this is essentially what our schema look like. It looks very similar to our fillables and to our forms. We've still got that blueprint, and this is a blueprint object within our schema component, and it's essentially allowing us to build our database table. So we got stuff like varchar, int, datetime. We've got an author ID, and we're simply passing in the name of our field, the length, etc., etc. So that is essentially what the schema allows us to do. You can see the last method, the build method, takes a callback or a closure, and we're simply sort of like adding on the primary key and making certain fields unique, and then we're sort of like building or a schema from there. And these are the schema that we then use to generate a migration from. So we're going to have a little script in there that we're going to type into our command line. It's going to generate a migration file based on this schema, and we can also push that to our database to create that table for us. So that is essentially what the schema is doing, and it's one of the first things that we're going to be creating when we start building this application over, because every model needs a schema. It's how we define different parts to that particular table, right? And the structure, the layout are going to be the same, but the only difference being what we're going to be putting into that particular table. They will have different fields, different types, etc. So that's a brief look on the schema. And so we've got all of our front-end templates is located within our templates directory. And again, they're very, very simple. I try and organize them to the best of my ability. So it makes it much easier for you guys to find stuff, right? So a simple template file, it can look something like our index, for example. You might have noticed that, and when at the very start I was using Twig as my templating engine. I've done away with Twig, not for any particular reason, just because I just wanted to implement my own little template, my own little template engine. It's not a powerful one, but again, I don't need it to be. If you get what I'm saying, I don't need it to be the most powerful templating engine. I just needed it to do what I needed it to do, because later on I might even scrap all these and do a React front end, which I'll have no need for a template engine then, because it will all be JavaScript files. So I didn't want to put too much emphasis on the templating engine, because that is something that can go. It doesn't have to be there, because as I'm saying, if you want to use a JavaScript front end or a JavaScript front end library, then you will have no need for a templating engine, because you just won't require it. So I've got a very simple templating engine that I've developed upon. It wasn't completely my script, but I will actually link to the author once I get into it. But I pretty much developed it to do what I needed it to do. This is essentially what it looks like, and we can define different blocks, block content, etc., etc. And all of these is just stuff I've added in, like the template extension, all these variables. I've added those in, and you can see the variable that we added in that we're asking for is our table, right? That's it. So if I take you back quickly to the controller, into the role controller, because this is a index for a roles controller, right? We're on the index route, which is what this route is, index. So we're loading this particular template, and you can see nowhere you can see that we're not really passing in a table variable anywhere, but we're calling the table variable right there. So this is what I'm saying. Convention. If you go with the convention, it will do a lot of stuff for you, because I've implemented quite a lot in the back end that will complete a lot for us. So it's good practice to go with the convention that I've set out. If you go against the convention, then there's quite a lot that you'll have to do to get these stuff to work differently. But again, I will show you. I will also show you going against convention and what you will have to do to actually get it to do the same thing, right? It's not the end of the world, but I just spent a lot of time trying to make it as easy as possible for all of us, for stuff to just get done automatically for us. but I will show you where all of these are coming from as well, so you know exactly where they're coming from and how we're doing it. So don't worry, I will go through it again, because as I said earlier, it's my job to make sure that you understand where I'm coming from, or why I do certain things, or why I do it the way I'm doing it, right? So let's move on. Role controller. And of course, last but not least, we've got our validation or our validate directory. And this is also why we're saying our entity is important, that we create an entity for each of our model, because that is how we're creating these validation class, right? At the moment though, we've only created 4 validation, because you might not need, not all single action classes require validation. It just sort of like depending on what you're doing. So we got role validate, and this is not new. This has been there from day one, but the syntax has changed. It's changed recently. Since PHP 8, I've sort of like gone in and I've sort of like refactored a little bit, just to try and make it a little bit more, a little bit more nice syntactically. But you can see that we are checking the fields for our role form, which is going to be role name, description, and created by ID. This is also important when we come to event dispatching, because each time we dispatch an event, we need to also submit or send the data that we want to dispatch, and we're doing that from these validation class as well, because we want to always dispatch valid sanitized data. So this is where we also do that from, but I will show you all of those linked up when we come to be building these ourselves. And you can see I've added in stuff like a validation rule object, which allows us to sort of like add rules on each of these fields. So the rule that we're adding is that this field is required and it must be unique. Same for description, it is required field. And what I said about refactoring in PHP 8, we're using the PHP 8 new match function, which it doesn't replace the switch. It's a lot more strict than using a switch. The switch is still a valid function to use, but for simple one-line stuff like this, I can use the match function. I can't use if and else statement because that would be invalid within this particular function. If I want to use if and else, I have to use a switch statement. But for something simple like this, one line, I can use this match function. It's much cleaner. It's just much more simple for stuff like this, right? It's not suitable for everything, but for stuff like this, we can use it. So that's the validation class, and this is what validates those sanitized data that's coming in. We're sanitizing it with the entity, and we're also validating those data before we push them to the database, right? So we sort of like got separate classes that's got their own little job, So there's a process that it goes through, which if you've seen some of my earlier videos, I actually demonstrate that process with some cards that I built, and I kind of show the different steps that the data goes through before it goes to the database. If you're pushing stuff or if you're requesting data, the process that it goes through before you then get that data back, right? I'm going to be bringing that card back up again in next video, so you guys can see the process, because there is a process that the data goes through from submit to request to response. There is a process, and there's a lot more to this validation class, but I will get into it. So because again, I want you guys to understand every single bit of what I'm doing right here. So that's pretty much the what we've got in our application. I mean, it was pretty brief. It's a long video so far. It's been well over an hour. That I've pretty much given you a brief reintroduction of this application. But trust me, it's a lot more going on, and we're going to take our time, just go over it, building this skeleton application, and at the same time trying to make it understand the complete ins and out of how we go about building what we want or taking out and doing something different. So I'm going to switch my screen, and I've got a simple application that I've been developing. Again, it's not a UI application. That's not what we focus on. We're going to be focusing more on the actual coding and how we can implement it within our own and put our own UI onto it. So I've switched my screen so you can see this very simple application that I've put together, so we can sort of like have a visual representation of the code that we've just sort of like walked through. So this is the this is the front of the application. This is a front end controller, which is going to be let's quickly get that out, which is going to be our home controller, which is what you're seeing right now. Right, we've got our home controller, we've got an index action, which is displaying this index.html page for us. Right, so we've got a simple, let's try and get my screen up properly so I can whiz through this with you as well. Alright, so if I click on the sign in button, you can see it takes us to our security controller. So I'm going to try and switch between my screens so you can see, I can demonstrate the different controllers that I'm currently showing you. So we're displaying at the minute our security controller, and we're displaying that index action, right? Which is what you're seeing right here. The index action is going to be displaying that login form right here. So if I take this login form out, I'm probably going to get an error. So with my browser, let's just reload this page. Save that. So yeah, so we get an error because I think I've got some caching set up on this, so when I'm refreshing, it's not doing it at the same time because I've got a little bit of caching going on. So I've taken that property out of that. So I've taken away that I've taken out that property from that form method. And you can see now we're getting an exception because that actual method requires that argument. So I'm going to put it back, save it. I'm going to reload again. And we're going to get our form back, just like so. So we got a basic login form, which we use to log into our backend. But before I do that, we got different links that takes us to a registration form. So you can see we got our registration page. I can actually create a quick user using my fake filler Chrome extension. I'll click it, it generates some dummy data, and click on register, and that will simply register that user within our database, and it quickly redirects to a different route, which saying thanks for registering, your account was created, but you now need to click the link that was sent to your email address that you registered with, and that will contain a activation code that you then need to click to activate your account. Because at the minute, once you register, that account will be has got a status of pending, which means you will not be able to get access within the system until you activate that account, which is pretty standard. It's standard stuff that you see across any application, right? So you can do that from the front end. You could also change your password if you've forgotten it. You got links that takes you back to creating an account. You got links to take you back to the registration page, right? So I've already got an account on here, and I've already got that account created as an admin account. So I'm going to log in, and I'm going to sort of like walk you through a quick walkthrough of the backend and see what it looks like. So again, when we log in, it sort of like redirects us back to our home controller, but this time you can see that now we've got some additional data, and these are all data that is displayed when we've got an active account login or active session login. So we can log out right away, or we can click this speedometer. That's going to take us to our dashboard, and that is essentially what our dashboard kind of look like. Again, this is not a UI stuff, so ignore the UI. This is just something that I've been building, something that I've been playing around with, and you can make your UI look however you want, right? And I'm using the UIKIT framework. I'm going to put a link down in the description. It's my personal choice. I didn't go with Bootstrap. I prefer to use this particular CSS framework because, in my opinion, I like it a little bit better. It's got a little bit more. It's a little bit more streamlined. I've not tested Bootstrap 5. I've heard good things about that one, but this is what I've gone with. Right, you guys are free to do whatever you want. You can keep it or you could change it to something that you want, right? But what we're doing right here, I'm displaying a tab, and we're simple sort of like generating data or getting data that we could get from either an API, external API, an internal API, and sort of like displaying that dynamic data within your dashboard. Again, you know what admin panels are, right? This is not going to be an admin or a UI application. We're going to be focusing more on the coding and understanding the different components. Then you can then take that and build what you want to build with it, right? The UI is just to demonstrate some of the components and stuff that we've just been talking about. Like, for example, our roles. So we got a drop down list. We can view all roles. We can add a new role, or we can view the log, right? Not all of it is created yet, but we can view all roles. And this is what I was saying about the table. So our index page will display that data for us within a table. So if I quickly take you back to our data columns, right, look at the role columns, and you can see this is the basic structure of our the fields that's coming from our database. So we've got ID field, role name, role description, created that, modify that, and you can also see that modified at is the name within our database, but I've changed it using the DT row to last updated. Let's get this off the screen, which is what you can see right here, last updated. This field right here, and it's a sortable field as well, so we can click it and it will sort the data ascending or descending. I had what do you call it, Font Awesome. I had some of the icons on, but I've taken the script out and I've not actually put a replacement icon script which is going to display the up and down arrows. But trust me, it is there, and it is working. And you can see that it just changed as well, right? So back into the code, we can manipulate those information. So for example, I can turn off any one of these columns. I can turn them off any one of these columns, to not be displayed permanently within our data column, right? So the next thing I mentioned also was the commander bar that I said was a toolbar, and this is essentially what it looks like. This is what it is. It displays the information like roles listing. And if I go to a new page, it changes to create new role. This is all being done dynamically, right? Not in our template file, but this is being done within our component based on the information that we're passing to our component, and it's doing that for us automatically. So I've also added in these sort of like drop downs, and they're meant to sort of like do cloning, bulk action, stuff like that, and settings. You can toggle certain fields, like for example, I can toggle last action. You can see that it toggles in and out, and this is all part of the UIKIT framework. I didn't have to do nothing extra to get that to work like that. This is why I prefer to use this particular framework, because it comes with all of these features built right in. Right, that's why I turn towards this one over Bootstrap, because I can do stuff like that without adding any extra JavaScript in. It's already there, right? So I call this the commander bar. We got the manager option, we got the customizable option, the filtering, which you can use to filter our search, what we got in our table. We can show a log, the log that any sort of like request or any sort of like user interaction, I'm generating log details that's going to be into a separate table by itself. But again, I'm talking a lot of what this is, and this is not important. What's important, again, is using the components that we've built so we can do this for ourselves. You don't have to build a commander bar if you don't want to. It's just me doing some stuff one day because I had an hour and I was a little bit bored, and I thought I'll just build a commander bar. That's all it was, right? And add new allows us to add a new role, and that could be anything. You add a role name, give it some description, save it. It gets added to the database, just like that. Some of the stuff that I'm working on, you can see we've got some icons. We've got an icon that is locked, and we've got some that is unlocked. And the idea behind that is the unlock. When you come across an unlock like this, what it's essentially saying is that you've got a role, but that role is unlocked. Is meaning that it's got no permission assigned to it, right? So when you got role like super admin that is locked, it means that it's got a role assigned to it already. So we can modify it, we can add more to it, but we're not going to be doing that because I've got a better way of doing it, which I'm going to explain in another video using event dispatching, right? So that's the role section. Permission section, again, it allows us to create roles and create permission. Then we can assign many permissions to one role. Then we can assign one role to one user, right? That's how I'm setting it up by default, because that's how I want it to work. So one user got one role, but many permissions can be assigned to one role, if that makes sense. It's like a many-to-one relationship between roles and permissions, and a sort of like a one-to-one or many-to-one relationship between users and role. But this is going to be dependent on the application that you're building. So again, depending on what you're doing, you're going to create the relevant roles and permission based on that application. It doesn't have to be anything basic like admin or super admin. It could be employees, managers, doctor, teachers, whatever application you're building. You're going to create the roles and permission that is suitable to that application, and then you can assign them to a particular user. So this is the bit that I'm also developing, but as you can see, we've got basic CRUD that we can do on all of these models. Users, again, we can do whatever we want. Well, we've got basic CRUD functionality. We can edit. No, on the edit part, you see the commander bar is saying we're on the edit section. We click this home icon. We've got different links that we can go to. So we've got show, which is viewing action, the view action, or the singular action, which shows that singular data. And other bits that I'm experimenting with is the status, because these are all coming from a database. So we've got the status which says lock or pending, and this is hard coded at the minute. This section is hard coded, but I did that so it reminds me that I need to put that bit in. So the idea behind that is if you create an account and it's pending or it's locked for whatever reason, and you've not rectified it within a certain amount of time, this is going to pop up. So me as the admin or someone who's got access to stuff like this can see it and can quickly resend an email to that particular user to say your account needs certain actions which you must take, or your account might be deleted, stuff like that. And again, these information right over here is just info that I'm putting in. It's not relevant to the application, but it might be relevant depending on what you're building. Again, this is all coming from a database. Fail login, last login, history, recent activity, notes. These are all database stuff, right? And again, you see we've got a nice tab, and that's all part of the UIKIT framework. There's nothing here that I had to do. It was all built in. So you see we got basic CRUD, which is the basic stuff what you come to expect from any framework. But the beauty is what's happening in the background, because that's mostly what I'm focusing on. Like for example, if I go to add a new user, this user or fake filler, right? Add a new user in, save it. It says new user added. You might think, all right, that's just some basic CRUD, which it is. But the beauty of what's going on is what's going on in the background, which you're not seeing. Because I developed this, I know that once I click that save button, a couple of stuff is also taking place in the background which you're not seeing using event dispatching. Two things that I'm actually doing is I'm sending an email to that user, and I'm also assigning that user a role, right? A default role. You might see that we've got these radios on the right, but this is not part of the users table. This is going to a different table. So I'm using my event dispatchers to listen for this event, and then I can do certain things based on that. So that's the beauty of event dispatching. And it's not so much that we've got CRUD. That's basic stuff, but the important stuff is what we're doing while we're creating these or executing these actions, because we can do stuff on every different route. We've created event dispatching on every single route, so we can do stuff in the background, and that is the beauty of it, right? That is the beauty of what this is doing. And so, like many other framework, we do a lot of stuff in the background that you're not really seeing, but it's taking place. Again, this is just something I've been developing, projects and stuff like that. It's not to worry about that, because it's the same as users and roles. And I've got a settings section which I'm also going to be putting in as standard in this particular skeleton framework, and it's going to be the setting that's going to be global to any application. To any application. So you got general settings. You could change stuff like the name of your site, admin email, um, your website address, stuff like that. I'm listening for any sort of like feedback from you guys. You can tell me what sort of settings that you want me to implement, because this is going to be part of the actual package. So it's going to be settings that's going to change some internal function or internal, well, going to manipulate some internal parameters, which I'm bringing forward in the settings that we can change from a UI standpoint. So we've got a lot of different options. We've got a lot of different options. As I said, I'm building it out as I go along, and I need feedback, or I could do some feedback, so I can put stuff in. We've got general settings, we've got security, we've got purge, we've got tools, and the purge is simple, sort of like it because the template engine it's using a caching, a simple caching, and I can actually purge those cache files. If I click that button purge, it simple deletes all those cache files, and as I go through, scroll through the back end, it automatically sort of like start caching those files over again. So just like so, you see that they've reappeared because we've been on some pages. It recached those files, and we're sort of like we can keep track of those files within this purge section. Again, this is very rudimental. It might change in the final product, but again, I just need some ideas. Need some input from you guys, what you would like to see in there, stuff like that. Yeah, that's pretty much the. Again, we got a lot of different settings that we could add in. Services, application setting, localization, branding, extensions, application configuration, and system. We've got general settings, security, purge, tools. Again, I'm building these out as I see fit, but any input from you guys would be good as well. So that's pretty much what the backend is. Once you see one section like that, a bit of CRUD, it's pretty much the same across different components. It's the beauty comes in what you can do using event dispatching on other components when you executing these actions. Right, that's where the beauty lies, not just doing basic CRUD. Again, we've got a bar chart in here, probably meaningless. It's just simple. It's just you can use it to show data. Again, it's really up to you guys. And the question sign is just saying we can have a dedicated icon there, but if there's not an icon, it's just going to show a question sign like you have not got an icon. So I'm going to show something anyways, and that's pretty much what it's doing. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, we're going to be jumping into this build. It's like a reboot because I did start it before and it didn't pick up a lot of traction because I don't think I was really sort of like doing it properly. But no, I really want to make a really conscious effort to sort of like dive deep and show you guys where I'm coming from. And as I was saying earlier, you can take it or you could do what you want with it. If you want to take some of the components and integrate it within your own project that you're building, please feel free to do so. I really have no issue. I got no issue. You guys doing that because the aim of this is really to sort of like help you guys sort of like learn some new stuff, because I'm also learning as I'm going along. We can sort of like see all these other big framework and see how they do certain things and try and understand it from a different point of view and try and get to that same point, right? So that's the aim of what I'm trying to do here. Just trying to break down certain barriers, in understanding some of these more complex systems, and we're going to try and sort of like approach it from a different angle. But as long as we can get to the same point, following good practice and standards, then that's all that matters. Because you can code, you could code in different ways to get to the same result. That's the beauty of coding. There's not one way to do a certain thing. You could skin a cat many different ways, and so long as we could get to the same point using good standards and following good principles, then that is all that really matters. So we're going to be doing a lot of that. I'm getting some portable gear. So if I'm working away, which I'm doing quite a lot these days, when I'm at the hotel doing nothing, I can pretty much try and set up and try and do some videos there and try and keep on top of what I set out to do from day one. So again, guys, please sort of like just interact with the content I'm putting out, because it helps with the algorithm. YouTube do punish you if you're not doing stuff on a regular basis, and that's my fault primarily, because I've not been posting as much as I know I should have been doing. So if you like it, like it. If you dislike it, dislike it. That is completely fine. Leave as much comment as possible. There's no stupid comment. I do reply to all of them. I do read all of them. I have got people who, one comment that I've got that was a bit rude, because I don't think that particular person really watched all the videos, but they were being a bit sniping. I thought I wasn't really having any of that. They came with insults, and I thought, not having that. So I replied back in a manner that they came with, which I'm not really sorry about that, to be honest, because they should have come with some more context, a little bit more understanding before they start saying certain things. But those sort of comments are like 1 in 100. Most of the comments I've got has been really, really positive, which really motivates me to sort of like want to do a lot more of these videos. So keep up the interaction, guys. It really, really helps. Not with just the YouTubes, but it a lot of motivation I get when I see these comments and see that people sort of like taking in what I'm putting out there, and it's benefiting some people in one way or another. That's really, really what it's all about for me, to be honest. So we're nearly at 300 subs. I've also seen that a lot of people is watching the content, but they're not subscribing. Please, guys, let's go ahead and hit that button and just help us grow. Help me put out as much as I can, so I can teach as much as I can, and also learn as much as I can, because it's always a learning game. There's no end to learning, because I'm still learning. Even though I've been doing this for about 15 plus years, I am still learning, because things changes so quickly. Thing changes, technique changes, the way we do things changes, technology changes. So it's a constant learning thing, and if I can teach someone something or show someone something, that's what it's about for me. Right? So it's late. My eyes are really heavy, so I'm going to be signing off, and we're going to be jumping into this application and building it out, and trying to get you guys to see where I'm coming from. You could take it, do what you want, cut it up, chop it up, put it in your stuff, mix it up, whatever. So again, guys, thanks for being patient. The video's going to be coming out thick and fast, so stay tuned, be blessed, or stay blessed, and have a good night. Laters.